There's 8 trillion in these RAAs. That's all that's happening really right now is RAAs. Now, you've got to understand how these RAAs work, and Dan knows them because a whole bunch of investors in his fund. Is these guys are networks. They're not like brokers get on the phone like buy, buy, sell. They go and have a steak dinner with their best client who talks about this Bitcoin ETF. They're like, I'm not sure. They read Barron's that week. They're like, I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do. They then go and play golf. Their other client talks about it. And eventually, this huge property developer from Cincinnati then sticks in, $5 million into the ETF.
Hey guys, welcome back to Everyday Finance. In this video, Raoul Pal and Dan Tapiero discusses Bitcoin and other crypto. According to Raoul Pal, there is currently $8 trillion in these RAAs. The focus right now is mainly on RAS. It's important to grasp how these RAAs operate and to understand them, because many investors in his fund belong to these networks, which are different. Brokers make calls to discuss buying and selling while enjoying a steak dinner with their top client, who shares insights, this Bitcoin ETF. It's as if they didn't even read Barron's that week, unsure if it's the right choice. One thing they do is play golf with their clients, discussing various topics until they realize the significance of the matter. A property developer from Cincinnati invests $5 million into the ETF. This is the process. Things are moving at a sluggish pace, and we are still in the early stages with many individuals involved. Price-focused when you analyze NVIDIA. You can observe how the price influences itself, creating a reflexive pattern. It seems like we are just at the beginning of this trend, and lots of things Dan and Raoul Pal discussed, so please watch the video to end, and share this video and subscribe our channel Everyday Finance. Thanks.
Yeah, this is bananas. This is the most successful ETF launch of all time. I mean, we've never seen anything like this, and it's only really just started. I don't know, Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, in one day, we onboarded essentially $100 trillion, right? If you think about all of the people globally who have stock accounts, right? How much value is held in all of those accounts globally? Not just Americans who love to own assets via equity and ETF form, but just think about it. People in Asia, people in Europe who have equity accounts. All of those traders on the interactive broker platform now can just push a button and they own Bitcoin. So I think, it's just like Coinbase in one day onboarding that kind of value. So I think, I knew it would be bullish. I didn't have any specific idea about it. I just thought it makes it really easy for people to own. And I have a lot of investors in my fund who maybe are a little older, and I've had a few of them tell me over the last 2 years or so, I would say, oh, did you get your Bitcoin? Now's a good time, 20,000, 25,000, 30,000. Buy a little Ethereum, 1,800, 2,000. They're like, no, we're just going to wait for the ETF. Okay. So I always have a lot of actual first hand data, right? So I was pretty confident. And the guys who are saying this to me are very sophisticated old world investors. I mean, Raoul, you would know a few of these guys that have said to me, oh, I'm just going to wait for the ETF. Beginning of the beginning. I mean, you have trillions of dollars that now have a one button push.
Yeah, there's eight trillion in these RAAs. That's all that's happening really right now is RAAs. Now, you've got to understand how these RAAs work, and Dan knows them because a whole bunch of investors in his fund. Is these guys are networks. They're not like brokers get on the phone like buy, buy, sell. They go and have a steak dinner with their best client who talks about this Bitcoin ETF. They're like, I'm not sure. They read Barron's that week. They're like, I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do. They then go and play golf. Their other client talks about it. And eventually, this huge property developer from Cincinnati then sticks in, $5 million into the ETF. This is the process. So it's actually really slow. And we've only just started. And a lot of these people are driven by price.
That's what you said.
If you look at Nvidia, you see how price feeds on itself. It becomes reflexive. So we've just started. These guys are not traders in the whole. These RIA networks generally talk to their clients about, you should think about an X% allocation. They put an X% allocation, or they mandate it and say, hey, we're going to do this for you guys. They do it. And then what happens is, Dan and I have seen this all the way through with friends of ours. They start with 1%. And then before you know it, they get up to 5%. And they're like, fuck it, we're going to 10%, because they start to understand the power of this thing. So it becomes very reflexive in price action. I've seen family offices. I've got one of the investors in my fund is a big Australian family office. At first, their allocation was 1%. I think they probably got up to 20% in crypto allocations in the end.
Dan Tapiero mentioned that in one day, we onboarded essentially $100 trillion. If you think about all of those people worldwide who own stock accounts, correct? What is the total worth of considering all those accounts worldwide, not limited to Americans who enjoy owning assets through equity and ETFs? Just imagine individuals in Asia and Europe with equity accounts, along with traders on the Interactive Broker platform, now have the ability to simply press a button and own Bitcoin. So Dan Tapiero believes it's just that easy. Operating similarly to Coinbase, Dan believes in providing value through quick onboarding processes. He anticipated a positive outcome without any particular insight, simply finding it convenient. He has many people who own a lot of investors in his fund, some of whom may be a little older. Dan Tapiero had a few of them. Inform him that in the past 2 years, he has often asked if you have acquired Bitcoin. Currently, it presents a favorable opportunity. Consider purchasing a small amount of Ethereum at prices ranging from $20,000 to $30,000, $18,800, $2,000. They insist on waiting for the ETF. These individuals are not traders overall. These RIA networks typically communicate with their counterparts. Clients should consider allocating a certain percentage of their investments. They allocate or mandate a specific action and then proceed accordingly. The outcome is then observed. Danad and Raoul Pal have navigated this journey alongside some of our acquaintances. They begin with a small 1%, and before you realize it, they can now enjoy up to a 5% return. But as they grasp the potential, we can increase it to 10%. Shows a high level of reflection in price movement. Raoul Pal has encountered family offices. Raoul has become one of the investors. This fund belongs to a significant Australian family office. Initially, their allocation was 1%. Raoul Pal believes they likely reached up to a 20% allocation in cryptocurrencies in the end. As the principal began to grasp the concept, it continued to evolve, and the price action followed suit. Let's back to the Raoul Pal and Dan Tapiero interview.
Because, once the principal started to understand it, that it just keeps building on itself, and the price action just builds on it. So we've, as Dan said, we're really, really early still.
So you're surprised?
Also, I would also just say that, many people, I would say that also many people, will do a dollar cost average. So this is, someone will say, okay, I'm going to 3%, and they do 0.5% every quarter for the next, few quarters. So I think there are a lot of people who purchase things like that. Very few people just come in and say, okay, put 5 million in, it's an all-time high, I don't care. A lot of those guys will do, so I think that you have to expect that there's a tail to many of these purchases that Raoul's talking about.
And then there's also these massive platform models like BlackRock, Fidelity, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, that suddenly add it to their asset allocation mix. And those guys control like $1 trillion of assets. So once they do it, it's the same process. It then starts dollar cost averaging in. And, we've seen BlackRock talking about doing that. I don't think it's even started yet. So those massive pools of capital start coming in as well. And we're not talking institutions. None of the institutions are in yet, really. Don't forget, the 401k bid in America is another big thing. One of the reasons passive funds have outperformed active portfolios, like the NASDAQ and the S&P, keeps outperforming, is because millennials every 2 weeks add to their 401k of this stuff. They can now add Bitcoin into their 401ks. So that becomes a every 2 week bid that goes in perpetuity forever. Now, it doesn't mean it can't go up and down, with the business cycle, but it's a very big structural change that people don't really understand.
According to Dan Tapiero, numerous people will choose dollar cost averaging, increasing by 3% initially, followed by a 0.5% increment every quarter for the foreseeable future. During quarters, Dan Tapiero believes that many individuals buy items without many others doing so. Simply walk in and confidently state, "Invest $5 million. It's at an all-time high," Dan said. Many individuals in that field tend to believe that there is a story behind most of these situations. Raoul mentioned the purchases. And according to Raoul Pal, there are also large platform models such as BlackRock and Fidelity. JP Morgan Stanley unexpectedly included it in the asset allocation mix. They manage a significant amount of assets, so once they take control, the process remains the same, and the dollar cost. Averaging begins calculating the average. We've observed BlackRock discussing the possibility, but Raoul doesn't believe it has begun yet. When significant amounts of capital begin to flow in, none of the institutions have joined in yet. If you learned something from this video, then please like this video and subscribe our channel Everyday Finance, and we will meet in next video. Thanks.